Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning. Welcome to Elevator Systems, where we look at ideas from Bowen family systems theory in brief and hopefully understandable ways. This season, we are looking at relationships across the lifespan. And today, I'll be honest, I don't know if we'll have much to say. The relationship we're talking about is quite straightforward, pretty easy, and I personally have never struggled in this relationship. We're talking about parenting, and our guest is Lauren Errington. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Dixie.
None of us have struggled today.
No, never.
Never. Okay. Lauren joins us from Sydney, Australia, where she is the executive director of the Family Systems Institute. She's also a mental health social worker and clinical family therapist and supervisor at the Family Systems Practice. She has written articles on the application of Bowen theory in family therapy and recently co-edited a special edition on Bowen theory for the Australia and New Zealand Journal of Family Therapy. Lauren, our own Katie, and Sarah Rougier, who's also from Living Systems, co-authored a soon-to-be-published article on working with parents for the International Journal of Family Therapy. And in the bio that Lauren sent to me, she says she is married, a parent of 3 school-aged children who help her keep a reality check on her own bandwidth and any idealistic notions of being a parent in practice every day, which is such a great description of parenting, Lauren. Welcome to Elevator Systems.
Thank you. I feel like it's my caveat for being here today. So just my very non-expert position, but I've had the privilege of doing some thinking, in my work to coincide with my life of parenting, I think, too.
Exactly. Well, you get to start. What is your elevator pitch on what's useful about Bowen theory in parenting?
In 25 words or less.
Yeah.
So I wrestled with this, but where I got to was when parents work on what sort of parent they want to be, what's important to them, and make an effort to manage their own reactivity as they try and live this out, it gives children the developmental space they need to grow up. So really parents focusing on themselves a little bit more and on their kids a little bit less.
Great.
Yeah.
Katie, your turn.
I decided to go with the concept. This season, I'm doing concepts that I'm highlighting. And so this concept that I chose for parenting is the area of differentiation of self, which is individuality and togetherness, because I think it really helps me think about my own journey of being a parent and then other people. So I think parenting highlights so well the push and pull of togetherness and individuality in the relationship. It's that dance of the triangle between the 2 parents or caregivers and their child. And this will differ in each family. And the extra fun is it will differ often in each family with each child. So there's this different push and pull, different sensitivity. And it's, again, we can revisit the earlier episode to learn more about individuality and togetherness. But this push or pull to be part of this group of family and to also be an individual. And so I think this varies in parenting across that developmental spectrum. There's different pushes and pulls for the child to be a separate being from the parents, and they will react in that relationship to that push and pull of being a part of the unit and being their own separate person. So this is why I was thinking this concept is so useful to me, is how it adapts over time. I think parenting, one of these challenges is this changes throughout the cycle of being a parent and based on context. So that is the concept that I find useful. Dixie, what have you got?
Yeah. I said many concepts came to mind thinking about parenting: differentiation of self, like Katie just said, individuality and togetherness, levels of fusion, over and under functioning, assessing one's beliefs and values, taking an I position. I remember very clearly the moment I realized my firstborn child had like a mind and opinions of their own, and it involved just putting a clip in her hair. And in that moment, I was not looking forward to like a lifetime of inevitable differences between us. So this is sort of my pitch here. Whether it's the opinion of your child, your partner, your mother-in-law, your best friend, the public health nurse, the author on child development who has a PhD, or your social media contacts, parenting can feel like a tug of war between competing versions of what's the right thing to do. And for me, Bowen theory and my like 11 and a half year relationship with a Bowen coach has helped me to have a better understanding of my own beliefs and values about parenting, and especially how to hold on to or adapt more thoughtfully when those predictable differences show up. So that was mine. From the archives, this week, we have a letter from 1966. They had problems in parenting in 1966. There's one general rule that applies to almost any problem involving children. This is to view any problem that focuses in children, whether physical, emotional, social, as a manifestation of an overt or covert disharmony between the parents. There is a good percentage of calm marriages in which a problem in a child is a more sensitive indicator of an underlying parental problem than anything in the parent's conscious awareness. If parents automatically regard a problem in a child as an early indicator of marital disharmony, and they can defocus the child and start a search for disharmony between themselves, they cannot lose. Just kind of a bold. There's lots of bold statements in there.
Yeah, there are lots of bold statements in there.
From this little book called Confident Parenting by Jenny Brown. As parenting manuals emerged in the 20th century, they became a stimulus and outlet for parents' worries. As parents outsource their development of child-rearing wisdom, they can easily become more uncertain in themselves. If you're going to assist your child to grow their resilience, the first step will be to increase your own resilience in tolerating your child's upset without feeling compelled to rush in and smooth over everything for them. The grown-up parent who really wants to be a loving resource to their child is prepared to work on themselves and not make a project out of their child. And then the final pitch is from the pens, the keyboards, the brains of Lauren, Katie, and Sarah. Can I read this if it's unpublished yet? Is that okay?
It's like a sneak peek, isn't it?
Presumably, yeah. Couple short things. Having a systems view can help family members as it allows people to broaden their view of the current challenge by looking at how the wider multi-generational family has managed itself over time and adapted to transitions and periods of stress. These ladies sound smart, don't they? And finally, it is essential that a parent's efforts in managing themselves differently is based on their own thinking, values, and parenting principles, and what they have defined is important enough to them to do something about, rather than being outcome focused on the child behaving differently. All right, all done. What do you notice in there?
You know, one thing I was thinking about I was thinking about that statement I think that Jenny made about anxiety in parents. And as I was reading, I get the New York Times on Sunday, and I thought, what timely. We're recording this on a Sunday. And on the back page of the opinion was talking about anxiety in parents around technology, and giving some advice about what to do. And I thought, this is so present in the world. Focus of anxiety on a role that's can be pretty anxiety provoking all on its own without other people coming in and telling you so much of what to do. So I appreciate that kind of grounding me as we start this episode, as I don't think any of us are coming here to tell people what to do, just to share some thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm really taken, I think, by Bowen's description in his own research with families that he noticed a real turning point in families where parents were able to work on themselves and make a project out of themselves and reduce that intense kind of project focus on the children, and I just think that is such an interesting thing to think about in terms of what's going on there and what kind of space that frees up in a family for each person then to be more of a self, to be able to think and act for themselves and relate to a more solid version of the other when that is going on, so that gets me really interested. And I think it's so interesting, isn't it? The now quite long history, you know, a century worth of parenting advice infiltrating people's homes and families and those sorts of things. I'm not sure parents are any less anxious because of the plethora of advice out there. I think people are more anxious and more overwhelmed and have lost a lot of confidence, actually, feeling and thinking like there's a way that they should be doing it, and that there's an expert out there who might think or not think what they're doing is okay. I think the capacity of parents has been undermined as part of that process. And, you know, we can talk about this, but when I think about the parents I work with, I don't think I've ever come across a parent who doesn't know what they want to do. It's the putting it in practice in the family and in their context that is part of the real challenge coming out of that. So I was thinking about that, Dixie, as you're sharing some of those quotes. Yeah.
Lauren, can I put you on the spot? For those who don't know what that means for an individual to make a project out of themselves rather than the child, I mean, I think sometimes people could hear that as, you know, we would hear lots of the narcissistic parent today, you know, that term out in the world where they just go away and only worry about themselves. And so could you explain a little bit about what that means through the lens of Bowen theory to make a project out of yourself as a parent?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think, can I use an example from my own life? Can we move into an example? Maybe this is like, I just kind of want to think quite practically about what this looks like. So I don't often talk about my own kids or parenting, but I actually have my daughter's permission to share this one because I think it's quite apt in thinking about the difference of a good thing being either a focus and a project on the child, or it being me working on myself as a project as a parent. And so when my kids were quite little, I did a lot of emotion coaching with them. And so if people are unfamiliar with emotion coaching, it comes out of John Gottman's stuff. Really interesting evidence base about how a vocabulary and repertoire of talking and thinking about emotions can help promote emotional intelligence in people. And so there's a lot of good things in there. And I'm all for talking about feelings and, you know, emotions. I think they're really good things. But I'll talk about that in a minute. What I saw in my kids when I did this quite a lot with them was that my daughter would, when she would get upset, she would say, "I sound like I am so upset." you know, you know, I sound like I'm so frustrated. You know, she was just kind of mimicking what I was saying out loud.
Right.
And, you know, there's something really interesting about that. On the one hand, it really calmed me down as a parent because I'm thinking, oh, she's got some kind of emotion language and that must be on the pathway to becoming emotionally intelligent. Fantastic. You know? But at the same time, I could absolutely see that she was doing it and reacting to me and in that relationship. And I would kind of be almost hyper attuned to the language that my kids were or were not using as evidence about whether they were or were not maybe on a path to emotional intelligence, you know. Now, I think there's a lot of good things in emotion coaching. I think one of the best things is the advice for parents to kind of slow down on the problem solving stuff. Like, I think that's really helpful. But when I've thought about this, I think that for me, that became a kind of focus on my kids as a project. You know, that was where the emphasis was. I do this so that my kids do this, so that they will turn out to be this sort of person or not. When I kind of slow down now and I think about that sort of thing, what I think attention to myself as a project, as a parent is, you know, talking about emotions is important to me. Like hearing how my kids describe their experience is important to me. And, you know, getting curious with them about how they feel about that and how they would express that. And can we use other words to do that, you know, and really listening to them and getting alongside them as they do that. And I can do that in the way that I talk about my own experiences too, you know, with my kids. And so the focus for me is much more on listening to my kids and speaking from my own experience, trying to be honest about times that I'm frustrated, you know, those sorts of things, rather than being so worried about what they are doing or not doing kind of out of that. So, you know, same value there almost, you know, but one is really focused on the kids and a project and one is kind of much more focused on me and kind of acting out of what's important to me in relationship with my kids and that. So I don't know if that helps, but I was thinking about that in preparation for this podcast.
It was such a beautiful example to really demonstrate the work of a parent making a project of themselves is really to tie back to theory, like the work on differentiation. What do I believe about this? What do I think about this? What am I willing and not willing to do? And then how do I hold on to that in the face of this relationship? This very can be intense, challenging relationship of parent and child. I really appreciated that example. Thanks, Lauren.
I mean, my kids are all like newly minted young adults, out in the world. But a lot of life, I just really wanted them to calm down. And I was really anxious or mad about the fact that they weren't calm, which I wasn't calm. So how can they be calm when I'm not calm? And probably the biggest thing in our world these days is if I'm going to be worried about how my kids are spending their money, how responsible am I being with my money? And, but so those just like those in the moment examples are.
Yeah, and the experiment that you get to live day in, day out is what does that shift of focus create for the kid? I mean, I think Lauren said it in hers, like that creates this different space when I'm not anxiously focused on changing a behavior in my child and I'm trying to manage myself in it and stay connected to them. That's a different energy in the room. And what does that energy produce? I don't think it's a miracle cure. Sorry, everyone out there. But I just get interested in what difference that makes when I'm able to hold on to it, which here's the shocker is there are good times and bad in my parenting too. There's times I can see it and hold on to it. And there's lots of times that I can't.
Yeah, I think that's, I think one of the things Bowen theory helps me with in thinking about parenting is the predictability that how we are going to automatically react is to try and move things on quickly or calm them down quickly or try and get comfortable again really quickly. I think this is the stuff that Bowen theory is really helpful on, is kind of recognizing how automatic those responses are, and I think in parenting, what that can turn into is a move to just want a quick fix for things. Everyone just calm down, and we're busy. Life is busy. We're in the throes of like the trenches of kind of just life with children. And so often we do move to that quick fix. And it is such an effort, I think, to have a longer term view and value and to think about what's important as a parent and then try and hold on to that in the midst of not only the relationship pushback, but also just the busyness and the want for a quick fix and to calm things down automatically.
Yeah. And deciding for yourself when you just need to pull the quick fix. I mean, I think knowing and having the grace for yourself that there are going to be times when you have the capacity for some really well thought out principled parenting. And then there's some times where you need to turn on a show.
Yeah, I tell you, it's not at 8:30 in the morning when we're trying to get out the door for school. It's just stuff that has to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my example was around that phrase that Dr. Daniel Papero uses is what is the help that helps? And I appreciated Katie talking about how this sort of togetherness and growing separate changes as the child develops, as the relationship goes through time. But I think parents are aware of this idea of what is the help that helps. And sometimes help doesn't feel so good when you're like, when is the moment to take the training wheels off the bicycle? Like, we know that, but I don't know. I don't know if it easier when it's younger than when it's older, but I've had a lot of moments in recent years where it was much more helpful for our family, for me as a parent, to be unhelpful in the moment, to make people unhappy, to be unhelpful in the short term, but long term, it's helpful. Did I say that right? And even hearing now that my kids are older, and the rules or the boundaries that they didn't like when they were teenagers, now they appreciate. And so just thinking about this short-term, long-term goals and
Yeah, and I think if parenting is long, right? I was sitting in my office the other week with a woman who was, it was like the grandparent phase, and was just talking about a little lamenting of like, I thought I was kind of done with some of these challenges that I'm up against with my child, and this is just bringing about sort of a new level of challenges that I'm up against. And I think, it is that, that context makes a difference. And some phases are, the context is quite challenging, and other phases I think have a lot of more space to it. So I appreciate that this is the long journey.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I always find it helpful when we're thinking about family systems theory to think about natural systems, as well. And I was thinking about it in relation to this concept, thinking like, what am I actually thinking about in terms of how other species do this? How do they parent, so to speak? It's this balance between, we talk about kind of separateness and togetherness in Bowen theory. It's this treading this line between being over involved or under involved. Species, when they do this well and they care for their young well in animal groups, they're not over involved, because if they're over involved, by the time the young kind of leaves the herd or the flock, they're not able to kind of live it in the wild by themselves, and that's a risk, right? But they're not under involved either, because there's a timeliness to when that happens and when they are resourced enough to go out on their own, and otherwise it's neglectful, and they're at risk as well. And so I was just thinking about this for myself, I guess, in parenting too. Like, what does being over involved look like? And when do I get anxiously over involved in things and crowd the kind of space that my kids need to kind of work things out for themselves? But also, when am I under involved? Because, it's really easy for me to kind of want to distance sometimes and avoid stuff too, and assume they've got it when maybe they don't actually, and I need to be a different type of resource in that. So, and I think this is where there needs to be flexibility, because there's different ages and stages of this in parenting as well as we go forward.
The one quote that really just in your description came out at me, I love that quote about the parent knowing the reality needs of the child. We're talking about later children with challenges, maybe developmental or mental health challenges. And I think each child will have different reality needs. And I like that as a real sort of test for me. How do I get the most factual with my own child about what her reality needs are?
Mm. Yeah. And I think, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this too. I think also there are reality needs for parents in different contexts and generations too. Like, I think, I think about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. Like, it's a bit of a reality check of the reality needs of our kids trying to navigate a very complex online space and social media, and his description in that space is that it's very easy for parents to be over involved in the real world and under involved in the online space. But I think about that too. And so I think there's some excellent things in there. I think it's interesting to think about how to use these same principles with this different context. Like, the principles are, what's important to me? How do I get thoughtful about this as a parent? How do I get not over involved, but under involved, but be a resource to my child as they're kind of navigating this bit of their growing up with these particular challenges, and a reality check on some of what that is. And how do I want to show up as a parent in that? Not anxiously taking over, but also not anxiously avoiding it either. And that's a particular challenge, I think, because the social media stuff and the online stuff has infiltrated homes, which used to be able to come home, recoup, kind of then go out there and live life, like it's now in our lounge rooms, bedrooms, all that sort of stuff. So I think it is a particular kind of time and challenge for parents with that too. So, but I was just thinking it's kind of different context, different content, same principles. How are parents going to get thoughtful about this? How am I going to show up? What's important to me? And how do I have clear calm, consistent thoughts and kind of actions on this that have that longer term view in mind.
And I also think, how do you get at the child in front of you? Because I think that applying somebody else's advice or belief to every child, regardless of how that child shows up in the world, I think it can be potentially less useful than knowing what is your child's unique strengths. What are their unique challenges that they enter the world with, and how, especially in this area of technology, you use that to influence, how you're going to think about that.
Yeah. And Roberta Gilbert's really good on this. She talks about kind of having that individual relationship with each of your children. Like, that's going to be more of a problem for some kids than for others, the online stuff. Like, I think that's part of the reality. But I think I found that really helpful, kind of thinking about what she's talking about with that, which is having that individual and unique relationship with each of your children and getting to know them and interested in them. As you said, Katie, kind of what are their strengths like as part of that, but also what are their particular vulnerabilities going to be and their challenges, and what am I more or less sensitive to as a parent coming from my own family, and passed down through the generations. There's stuff I'm going to be more comfortable with than others as I kind of try and navigate with that with each kid.
What I thought with the quote from your guys' article was looking back at that multi-generational history, and like you said, the content will be different, but what was it like when the party line phone came into the house, or when the radio came in, and what were the boundaries, and which kid railed against that a bit more than the other, and could you gather some of those facts, and how did it get managed? I think could be really helpful.
Yes, yeah. That knowledge that's transferred through the generations about what worked well, what didn't work well. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Katie, did we do your example?
You didn't do my example, and now I feel like you guys had really thoughtful examples, and the example I brought was probably a silly one. I appreciated that Lauren said about bringing the natural systems in, but I could not get my head around a solid example. So I'm going to put it in my takeaway of Peg Donnelly does a really good Family Matters, where she talks about, she spent a lot of time thinking about other animals, other species, and how they did parenting. So I'm going to let her, who's thought a lot more about it than me, talk about it. My example was a silly one. Is I think that the one I always think about, the movie, which I felt I had to mention during this time, was Parenthood. I'm a child of the 80s, so Parenthood was my go-to movie to look at multi-generational process, to look at different sibling position and how the parent managed the challenges of that different sibling position. That lovely example of the parents who get so focused on that child being gifted, and then one parent collapses in how they want to parent and lets the other one lead. And it has consequences, right? It's like it has consequences for the marriage. She starts some disordered eating. Like there's a way where, it really stirs up the system when she's not being solid with her principles. So if you have not watched that movie, I was talking to someone about this example though, and I have not watched the series Parenthood. So my takeaway is I'm going to go actually add that to my list, that if I'm going to check, maybe I'll have more things for future episodes based on the series Parenthood.
What about takeaways for people? Resources, questions, things that they can think about?
Can I make one? I think sometimes when we talk about parenting, parents hear it that we're here to blame the parents. And I wondered if each of you would have a way you'd use the lens of theory to think about how it's just less useful to blame parents. I think for therapists, for society, for professionals, I think. And how do you think about that using the lens of theory?
And what do you make of it with the Bowen quote of looking the problems in your marriage?
I think part of thinking about a family as a system is the pros and cons of that. Like we're all tightly interwoven together. There's just no ignoring that. I mean, and that's a really beautiful thing because the whole system operates and helps others function and are a resource to each other and all of those sorts of things. I think also everyone's just trying their best to make life work. You know, I do think, though, that parents have a unique position in the family system, and an opportunity to take leadership on things, and to, because their prefrontal cortex is more developed, because they have more life experience, have slightly more capacity than younger folk in the family to be able to step out and interrupt patterns. So I don't think that's a blaming thing. I think that's an opportunity. I think parents are the ones with the opportunity to say what's working here and what's not, and what's actually in my control and what's not in my control there. I think parents can feel blamed when we get really caught up in there being so much emotional energy going into things that we can't control. I think Jenny Brown's stuff in the Parent Hope Project is so good on this. You know, I think actually that can free parents up a bit, in a non-blaming way, to go, this is my bit. You know, how do I stay in my lane, kind of keep working on what I can actually work on and have some degree of control over, like, as part of that. So I don't know. That's where it takes my thinking as you ask that question, Katie. But we're super sensitive to this. I mean, parenting is a hard thing, and we're constantly comparing and contrasting ourselves to other people, just, you know, and so I think it is a really sensitive area. But I do think if we can really bring it back to what parents are actually in control of and what they're not, that can actually be freeing for people too.
Yeah, my thought went to, you know, what Lauren is speaking of the sensitivity of the system, and how, I mean, I didn't realize it, but I have probably 3 times in my life that were pretty low points in my life. And I didn't realize it. Like, I don't know how, it took me a long time, probably in the past 2 years. I'm like, oh, sort of the whole family was struggling, like across, like deep into the family. And I would never have put that together, right? And so I think that in a sense can reduce that blame, is just if you get a broader look and just say anxiety that affects everyone in different ways, but it takes maybe the blame, and how that can be incredibly useful because we figure it out, and then sometimes we figure it out less well. What's your take on it, Katie?
I appreciate both of the things you said. You know, I think that multi-generational view, I think the more I spend thinking about systems and how intertwined they are, the more I think it's just not useful effort to say this person, because everything is so interrelated. You know, the way that a frustration might move from me into my child might be based on another, like you said, another touch point in the system that is, you know, come towards me, and I'm trying to get rid of it. You know, so to think about how interrelated all of this is. And again, that appreciation of this opportunity. I liked that word, Lauren, about I'm here. What can I do with my side of this? I can't change the other people, but what can I take on with my side? And I think, you know, that's always, obviously, as a therapist, I'm sitting in a room with parents who are interested in doing something different. And I always think, you know, that's huge. That's the brave first step. You're taking this opportunity to say, I want something different. I don't know what it is, but this isn't working. So that's, you know, that's my things. But I thought it was important, because I think parents really do hear, you know, they're there to blame.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we have almost nothing to say today. We definitely haven't gone over already. My takeaways were Parent Hope Project, website, resources. There's blog posts, there's podcasts, there are people at Living Systems and in Australia and presumably around the world have done this training that could be a resource to parents. So I will put all of those links up.
Yeah. And my takeaway is, I'm just going to read this out from Roberta Gilbert. I found it such a helpful little kind of piece. She says, of all the legacies a parent can give children, by far the best is that of raising his or her own level of differentiation as high as possible in a generation. If that is the parental focus, the children will automatically function better. Like that idea that actually me working on myself, that is a gift to the generations in my family that are to come. I just think that's that's a really interesting piece in terms of thinking about what family systems theory has to offer in the parenting space. And it does, I think, flip the script on a lot of the parenting advice out there to say, you know, there is an attention to self here that is not selfish, but actually will promote not only yourself as a resource in your family, but increase the capacity of your whole family system as well. So I need to chew on that and really think about that more and those sorts of things. But I found that a really helpful thing to kind of come at as well.
I'd love to hear the physiology or the biology of that, because I think if parents' anxiety decreases, and how does that shift for the kids?
It would be. I have two takeaways that I wanted to say. The first is I appreciate the statement that to raise a child takes a village. And I think I would encourage people to pay attention to the village you have around you that you might not know. I think parenting works well if you have people that can be resources for you that, you know, maybe you don't think about them. You know, we're in a little epidemic of people saying, oh, I drop the E word, of people feeling very lonely and isolated. And I just wanted to remind people that there are resources out there in this journey of parenting, and you know, look for those that help you do your best thinking. And then the other thing that I think is a takeaway that I find so useful in my journey of parenting is the silly parenting memes that are out there in the world that can just pull me right out of seriousness and make me laugh. And I told Dixie the one that I saw on my screen a couple days ago was, the moment you buy something in bulk for your children, they will decide they hate that thing. And I just think we all need to laugh a little bit as parents, right? We just need a little humor, a little lightness, and the memes. Some people are so creative with the ways that they can throw these things out.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Katie. And I think having a sense of humor is about being able to step back a bit and just see it in a different, you know, like zoom out and see it. And, you know, my daughter came to me the other day and said, Mom, I want to know what you think about something. And you can't respond with well, what do you think? And I was like, okay, I hear that, you know, like, how do I actually engage with this and hear, like, be interested and kind of share my thinking, but also this kind of dialogue. And I just think it's not about tricks, is it? It's not about techniques. It's actually about this relationship and how we're going to show up. And I think I appreciated being kind of called out on that, because I was like, but I can have a sense of humor about that, because I can think, oh, I can see what's going on here. That's so I think, you know, the humor is about having some flexibility too and being able to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for being here today, Lauren. Tomorrow, you're in tomorrow, but we're in today, right? It's always the joke. Yeah, and remind people there'll be lots of links in the show notes today. And as always, I hope our conversation has sparked some curiosity for listeners as they go out into the challenging but important relationships of parenting. This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.